James was a devoted farmer who cherished his time with his animals. Among his cows, horses, pigs, and chickens, sheep held a special place in his heart. They were mischievous and amusing, often doing things that made James burst into laughter while he worked. He relished shearing them in the summer, using his clippers to remove their thick wool coats and feeding them in the evenings. The sheep would eagerly approach him, bleating and baying, happy to see their kind owner. But what James loved most about the sheep was their adorable lambs during lambing season. He delighted in assisting the mother sheep during birth and could spend hours watching the newborns frolic in the fields. Despite their occasional misbehavior, such as fighting and moodiness, which sometimes led them to escape into the countryside, James never held it against them. He continued to enjoy caring for them and working on his farm, living his dream life. Among the flock, there was one sheep James was particularly fond of, Dolly. She was a large sheep that often stood guard over the rest of the flock, earning a special place in James's heart. Dolly, a matriarch among the sheep, set a good example for the others and taught the lambs how to behave on the farm. However, she was not immune to mischievous behavior herself. Despite her role, Dolly often caused a commotion and once even orchestrated a mass breakout by barging down a fence. Nevertheless, James couldn't help but adore Dolly, especially with her distinctive black patch around her eye, giving her the appearance of a pirate sheep wearing an eye patch. One morning, as James went about his routine of feeding the animals, starting up machinery, and making business calls, he noticed something amiss. Several sheep were missing. After counting multiple times, he confirmed that 4 sheep were unaccounted for. Running along the perimeter of the sheep's field, he discovered a fallen fence post at the corner, creating a small gap through which the sheep had escaped. Thankfully, 3 of the sheep were grazing nearby and were easily returned to the field. James repaired the fence but realized Dolly was still missing. He sighed, realizing that if she had ventured into the wild countryside, finding her would be nearly impossible. Tragically, the presence of wolves in the surrounding wilderness posed a grave threat to any stray sheep like Dolly. With no success after hours of searching, James reluctantly returned to the farm, his heart heavy with the thought of Dolly's possible fate. It seemed as though Dolly would remain lost for the foreseeable future. James deeply felt the absence of Dolly, realizing how much he had grown attached to his favorite sheep. He missed the routine of giving her extra attention and watching over her interactions with the younger sheep. The uncertainty of Dolly's whereabouts and her well-being weighed heavily on his mind, knowing that even with her strength, she would likely meet a tragic end. As months passed, James gradually moved forward, focusing on getting his farm back on track. The animals thrived and business flourished, with James even considering expanding the farm and purchasing additional land. It was an exhilarating time for him, feeling in control and optimistic about the future. Despite the challenges he had overcome, James couldn't foresee the extraordinary event that was about to unfold, something entirely unforeseen by anyone. What was about to disrupt James' contentedness? Keep reading to discover the surprising answer. While feeding the horses, James spotted a sheep just beyond the field's fence. It was a large, wild-looking sheep with an incredibly thick fleece, appearing and untamed as if it had lived in the wilderness its entire life. Initially thinking it was one of his escaped sheep, James approached for a closer look. To his astonishment, he realized it wasn't one of his sheep. However, the black mark around its eye was unmistakable. It was Dolly. Rubbing his eyes in disbelief, James led the sheep to a nearby gate, and it trotted in as if it had never been away. This was undoubtedly Dolly, but there was a significant issue. Her fleece had grown to an enormous size, giving her the appearance of a fluffy cloud. James estimated the wool's depth to be several inches, if not close to a foot. He knew he would have to trim it immediately. Poor Dolly must have been exhausted and worn out from carrying around such a heavy load for who knows how long. Overwhelmed with love, James realized tears were in his eyes. As he began leading Dolly back to the flock, she made a peculiar noise, a mix of cooing and whining. Little did James know, things were about to take a strange and unforeseen turn, something beyond anyone's imagination. The noise coming from Dolly's wool was unlike any sheep sound James had ever heard, despite his experience with many sheep. Perplexed, he examined Dolly closely and realized the noise was not from the sheep herself, but from her thick, matted wool. With a sense of trepidation, James reached into the wool and was startled by what he felt inside. Parting the wool, he was shocked to find a baby human boy. His heart racing, James carefully lifted the baby out, only to discover he was holding onto another hand, belonging to a baby girl. Scooping them both up, James noticed a third baby nestled in Dolly's wool. Trembling with disbelief, he wondered why the babies were hidden there, who had placed them, and where they belonged. Thinking quickly, James contacted the local police station and recounted the bizarre discovery. He informed them that he would take the babies to the hospital for examination before handing them over to the authorities. The doctors determined that the babies were severely malnourished and in need of extensive medical care. Despite their condition, they would survive. One thing was certain, without Dolly's wool, the babies would likely have perished. Her unusual adventure had saved their lives. The circumstances surrounding how the babies ended up in Dolly's wool remain a mystery. What is certain, however, is that Dolly's unexpected journey had played a vital role in ensuring their survival.